It was only before my death that I learned my husband, Xiao Jian, was a woman. She married me back then only because she was in love with Pei Yun. As a woman disguised as a man, Xiao Jian could not be with Pei Yun. In a fit of jealousy, she deliberately schemed to marry me, who had a childhood betrothal to Pei Yun. She trapped me in the deep courtyards of the rear residence, wasting 10 years of my youth and leading me to a miserable end. Fortunately, I was reborn on the day I married Xiao Jian. Before my eyes was a festive sea of red, and in my ears the lively sound of Suona horns. Only at this moment was I certain that I had truly been reborn. My heart pounded so violently that I couldn't help but twist my handkerchief. I wanted to lift my veil, rush into the crowd, and furiously expose the truth of Xiao Jian's disguise. Luckily, I held back. If the truth were exposed, Xiao Jian wouldn't suffer much punishment. On the contrary, my reputation would be stained. This world, after all, is far too harsh on women. Therefore, I had to proceed slowly. Besides, she wasn't the only one who had wronged me. I would make every single one of them pay in blood. The entire wedding ceremony was identical to my previous life. When it came to the wedding night, Xiao Jian brought a large group of rowdy friends to stir up trouble in the bridal chamber. Just as before, she ignored the matchmaker's pleas, threw aside the ceremonial rod, and deliberately tried to lift my red veil with the tip of her foot. I was prepared. I dodged aside. I tore off the red veil myself and flung it into Xiao Jian's face. The crowd of troublemakers roared with laughter. "Xiao Jian, your new bride has quite a temper." Having lost face, Xiao Jian froze for a moment, then flew into a rage. "Shen Langxi, I went to the trouble of marrying you, a merchant's daughter from a minor family, with a grand procession. Do you really think you are someone important? Believe it or not, I could divorce you this instant." I sneered. "Fine, then write it. Whoever doesn't write the divorce letter is a dog." Xiao Jian was choked by my words, pointing at me, speechless for a long moment. She had intended to humiliate me in front of everyone. She never expected me to change from my usual meek and submissive demeanor. Seeing the situation turn, her friends advised her not to go too far. "Brother Xiao, don't take it too far. You took 15 strokes from your father's rod just to marry this bride. A little fun is one thing, but from now on you two should focus on living a good life together." The matchmaker also tried to smooth things over. Holding up 2 cups of nuptial wine, Xiao Jian kicked the cups over and roared. "All of you, shut up, Shen Langxi. Let me tell you, I don't like you at all. Don't you dare dream I'll ever be good to you. Just you wait. I have plenty of ways to deal with you." Seeing her so flustered and exasperated, I actually smiled brightly. I then instructed my dowry maid, Chun Tao. From this day forward, no dogs are allowed inside, especially those named Xiao Xiao. Xiao Jian's face twisted with rage. Suddenly, as if remembering something, she looked me up and down and said menacingly, "No wonder Pei Yun refuses to acknowledge the betrothal with you. Who would like a shrew like you, let alone marry you?" She expected me to be overcome with shame, but hearing that familiar name only pricked my heart for a moment. It could no longer stir any great waves. I replied calmly, "Would Pei Yun prefer a man like you?" I emphasized the word man. It clearly struck a nerve with Xiao Jian. In the end, she smashed everything in the room in a fury and stormed out. The matchmaker and several maids trembled in fear. I waved my hand wearily, dismissing them. Alone, I walked into the courtyard under the high, round moon. Only a single peach tree kept me company. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the night. "Miss Shen, I apologize on Xiao Jian's behalf. She is still young and lacks propriety. I will speak with her later." Pei Yun clasped his hands in a gesture of respect. A mocking smile touched my lips. No longer would I endure in silence as I had in my past life. I questioned him coldly. "Master Pei, may I ask in what capacity you represent Xiao Jian, a close friend, a brother, or something else? Regardless, it is not your place to speak for her." Pei Yun was rendered speechless by my aggressive questioning. How could he have imagined that the once graceful and gentle Shen Langxi would now stand under the pale moonlight like a vengeful spirit? A flicker of guilt crossed Pei Yun's face. When it came down to it, he was the cause of all this. Xiao Jian was the late-born child of General Xiao. She was disguised as a man because after the general's first wife died, his concubine, desperate to be promoted, bribed the midwife to lie and say she had given birth to a son. Xiao Jian was raised as a boy and spoiled rotten by the general, growing into an unruly tyrant. When she was old enough, Xiao Jian was sent to an academy where she met Pei Yun. At first, they were like bickering rivals. After an accident, Pei Yun discovered her true identity. They gradually became inseparable friends, their bond deepening into a subtle romance, though neither was willing to admit it. This continued until my father, coveting the Pei family's wealth and status, took me to visit them, brazenly bringing up our childhood betrothal, sealed by a jade pendant. When Xiao Jian found out, she exploded with jealousy and gave Pei Yun the cold shoulder. Pei Yun, however, was conflicted. Xiao Jian, have you ever thought that one day I must marry a wife and have children? He had meant this to push her to reclaim her female identity for his sake, but Xiao Jian interpreted it differently. She thought he liked me and would marry me, especially since he had often helped me when I was mistreated by my stepmother. Conveniently, Xiao Jian also wanted to avoid being forced to marry some noble woman. I, with my gentle nature and unsupportive father, was the perfect pawn. During a flower festival, Xiao Jian orchestrated a plan for me to fall into the water, then rescued me herself. By doing so, even if the Xiao family didn't propose, my father would shamelessly push for the marriage to secure the connection. Pei Yun knew of Xiao Jian's intentions from the very beginning. He never tried to stop her or tell me the truth, at most. He argued with her a few times. He simply stood by and watched me marry into the Xiao family. He watched as I toiled serving my father-in-law and managing the household. For a decade, I diligently played the part of the perfect daughter, in-law only to meet a tragic end. And for that, Pei Yun shed a few sorrowful tears, the very picture of hypocrisy. I suddenly put on a sorrowful expression. My mother passed away when I was young, and my father was always busy with his business, so I never knew the joy of being a cherished daughter. Now, married into the Xiao family, I had hoped for a loving and respectful husband, but today's events have shown me I have entrusted my life to the wrong person. Master P. Although we had a betrothal and I know you have no feelings for me, I have always respected you as an older brother. You knew Xiao Jian's character, so why didn't you tell me the truth before the marriage? If I hadn't fought back just now, word would have spread that I am easily bullied. What face would I have left to live in this world? The guilt on Pei Yun's face deepened. He sighed lightly. Miss Shen, it was my fault. I, Pei Yun, promise you here, and now that I will protect you in the future, and help you secure a divorce as soon as possible. I will not let anyone bully you. With Pei Yun's promise, my initial objective was achieved. I sent him away casually. From a distance in the courtyard, I could faintly hear Pei Yun scolding Xiao Jian, followed by General Xiao's furious roars. A sense of satisfaction filled my heart. I plucked a peach blossom and crushed it in my palm. The juice was a savage scarlet red, snaking across my skin. Just now, the matchmaker had said this peach tree hadn't bloomed or even sprouted leaves for years. Only today, on my wedding day, a few small blossoms had suddenly appeared, a rare good omen. Yes, a good omen for the vengeance I would claim from them. In my past life, in my 10th year of marriage to Xiao Jian, she had become the celebrated general of the West. I overheard a conversation between her, Pei Yun, and General Xiao and learned the truth of her identity. It turned out even General Xiao had been deceived for years. I was the last to know. Before I could even process my anger, General Xiao drew his sword and cut me down. My blood sprayed all over that peach tree. The following year, the long, dormant tree bloomed with an astonishing vigor. The branches were heavy with blossoms, their pink hue as vibrant as blood. My soul was trapped in that tree, I was forced to watch Xiaojian rise higher and higher. Eventually, she broke free of her constraints, publicly revealed her female identity, and married Pei Yun in a grand ceremony. On the day of her wedding, the peach tree withered and died overnight, and my resentment reached its peak. The heavens have eyes. I was granted a new life. For her actions, Xiaojian received another 20 strokes from General Xiao's rod. That very night, she petulantly left the residence to travel and unwind in Hangzhou. The next morning, I calmly served tea to General Xiao alone. Seeing Xiaojian absent, the general slammed his hand on a table, shattering it. When he saw my respectful demeanor, devoid of complaint, he couldn't help but feel guilty. "Good child, you have been wronged." General Xiao had risen from humble beginnings, fighting his way up over decades to his current position. He never looked down on others, and naturally, he did not disdain me for my commoner status. He called for the steward to bring the keys to the storehouse, land deeds, and other documents, intending for me to take charge of the household. In my previous life, under Xiaojian's cold gaze, I had politely declined. Raised on principles of decorum, I subconsciously deferred to my husband. That was what led to my later isolation and helplessness. But after 10 years as a ghost, I had seen the depths of human depravity and ugliness. Reborn, my temperament had completely changed. I knew I couldn't rely on anyone. Only what I held firmly in my own hands was the best strategy. I accepted them graciously. "Thank you, father-in-law. I will do my best to manage our home." General Xiao had been rewarded handsomely by the emperor over his years on the battlefield. The treasures were countless. With money, my future plans would be much easier to execute. 3 days after my wedding, I returned to my maiden home. My stepmother, having already heard about the wedding night incident, greeted me with cold sarcasm. My father, seeing that I was not favored and could bring him no benefits, immediately dropped all pretense of warmth and dismissed me perfunctorily. I paid them no mind. After a few superficial words, I went to a remote courtyard. Pushing the door open, I saw a small, thin figure hunched over a desk, practicing calligraphy. I walked over and placed a food box in front of Shen Lansheng. "I brought you your favorite lychee pork and cherry snowflake pudding. Have some." Shen Lansheng glanced at it, then quickly looked down, hiding the longing in his eyes. "I don't like them anymore. Take them away." I sat down in front of him and took the calligraphy paper from his hand. "They say a gentleman is true to himself and others. I know you are doing this because you feel for me and don't want me to spend my dowry on you." "Found out." Shen Lansheng's ears turned red, but he kept his small face tense. "Since you know, then leave. Don't waste your money on me." Before my stepmother married into the family, my father had a concubine who gave birth to Shen Lansheng and then passed away. When my stepmother arrived, she saw him as a thorn in her side. With me protecting him, his life was tolerable. But after hearing about my wedding night, he didn't want to be a burden and tried to push me away. In my previous life, I didn't understand Shen Lansheng's cold, on the outside, warm, on the inside nature. I mistakenly thought he truly disliked me and cut off contact with him. Later, after I was murdered, the Xiao family claimed I died of a sudden illness. My father not only received a large sum of money but also a minor official post. He was so pleased that he even said it was my own lack of fortune. The entire family was overjoyed. Only Shen Lansheng became quieter than ever. Under the cover of night, he dug up my coffin and discovered the true cause of my death. He then quietly worked his way close to Xiaojian for years. After gathering substantial evidence, he was about to expose her when she discovered his plan and struck first. Shen Lansheng was killed silently, his body buried beneath the peach tree. Only then did I realize the feelings this quiet, unassuming half-brother had for me. This life, I would not repeat that mistake. I smiled and placed the cherry snowflake pudding in his hand. "Not only will I waste money on you, I will waste even more time and energy. I am going to send you to school and hire masters to teach you martial arts. With that, I had a servant bring in a red tasseled spear. Shen Lansheng stared at it, unable to resist reaching out to touch it. To fight on the battlefield for his country had always been his ambition. Sadly, in his past life, his stepmother's abuse left him frail and sickly. Just surviving was a struggle. He touched it only twice before lowering his eyes and refusing. "Take it back. I don't like it." I firmly turned his shoulders to face me, meeting his evasive gaze. "If you are worried about money, let me tell you. I now control the Shao family's treasury. A little bit leaking from my fingers would be enough to keep you comfortable for a lifetime." Shen Lansheng wavered. "I heard that man doesn't treat you well. That is why you need to eat well and grow strong so you can help me. Lansheng, you are the only family I have left." Meeting my hopeful gaze, he nodded forcefully. After giving him some instructions, I had just left the residence when I ran into Pei Yun. I was a little surprised. In my past life, he should have been in Hangzhou with Xiaojian at this time. This life, I had deliberately stirred the waters, so naturally, they didn't have the chance for their relationship to blossom. "Miss Shen, are you all right?" Pei Yun, worried that I had been mistreated at home, couldn't help but ask. My maid, Chun Tao, timely stepped in to remind him. "Master Pei, my mistress is already married. She is now Madame Xiao." Pei Yun was at a loss for words, the self-blame in his eyes deepening. He was also in a difficult position. Marriage was a woman's lifelong commitment, yet Xiaojian had carelessly ruined someone's life out of jealousy. Pei Yun had argued with her, urging her to face reality and grant me a divorce. But the ever-reckless Xiaojian wouldn't listen to a word of reason. They had a falling out, and a rift was already forming between them. Pei Yun's heart was slowly starting to lean towards me. I gave him a perfunctory curtsy and walked past him. "Master Pei, you are well aware of how I ended up in this situation." Pei Yun opened his mouth but couldn't utter a word. He followed me from a distance, silently escorting me back to the Shao residence. Chun Tao couldn't help but look back every few steps. "Mistress, do you think Master Pei likes you?" She didn't know the full story and could only guess at this reason. I curved my lips in a small smile but didn't answer. It would be best if he did. Simple guilt fades quickly. Only the tangled threads of emotion would be useful for my future plans. Chun Tao's face lit up with gossipy excitement. "Mistress, I support you. That Xiaojian is clearly no good. Don't worry, I'll keep your secret." I shook my head with a helpless smile in the last life. Shen Lansheng was able to gather evidence largely thanks to the help of Chun Tao, who endured humiliation in the Shao residence. After his death, she too met a tragic end. Having such a loyal maid was my good fortune. A month later, Xiaojian, having spent all her money, returned to the residence in disgrace. When she came back, she found me in the study, reviewing account books and working the abacus. She stormed in and snatched the ledgers. "Where is Steward Zhang? Did he kick the bucket and ascend to the heavens? Why is every Tom, Dick, and Harry trying to get their hands on my Shao family's property?" Steward Zhang hurried in. "Young master, it was the old master who put the young madam in charge." Xiaojian didn't believe it and viciously threw the ledgers at him. "Then what is the use of you? Sooner or later she'll collude with outsiders and empty our coffers, and you'll all be left with nothing." Xiaojian's tantrum brought General Xiao to the scene. He entered and, without a word, slapped her across the face. Xiaojian became even more defiant. "Father, since Langshi has been managing the house, everything has been perfectly in order. It is not your place to cause trouble." Seeing the time was right, I stepped in with a submissive posture to persuade the general. "It is my fault for not doing well enough. Please, father-in-law and husband, do not trouble yourselves by arguing over me." Xiaojian spat. "Shen Langshi, stop acting. Pei Yun isn't here. He won't fall for your hypocritical act." General Xiao was so enraged he started shouting curses. "You rebellious child. Langxi is part of our Xiao family and has a perfectly innocent relationship with that Pei boy. I've seen it with my own eyes. It is you who slanders people without cause. I'll beat you to death today." The scene devolved into chaos. While my words were pleading for him to stop, I was actually keeping my distance, giving General Xiao plenty of room to swing at Xiao Jian. However, deep down, the general would always side with his own flesh and blood. After a few blows, he was stopped by Steward Zhang and the others. Once he had calmed down, General Xiao threw an invitation card on the table. In 2 days, the eldest princess is hosting a flower viewing banquet. You and Langxi will go together, and when you are there, you will behave yourself and not cause any trouble. General Xiao believed in family harmony and was trying every way he could to force Xiao Jian and me to get along. I respectfully agreed. Xiao Jian, upon hearing this, had a scheming, playful look in her eyes. On the day of the banquet, Xiao Jian left for the princess's residence ahead of me. I arrived later in my own carriage. After taking my seat, I noticed the varied glances from those around me. Chun Tao, unaccustomed to such grand occasions, grew nervous. "Mistress, why are they looking at you like that?" I remained calm and composed. I didn't have to guess. Xiao Jian was surely behind it. After being ignored all morning, Xiao Jian came over to provoke me, gloating. "How do you like it?" I curtsied. "The delicacies at the princess's residence are exquisite, and the flowers are a dazzling sight. It is truly a wonderful experience." Seeing no sign of distress on my face, Xiao Jian snorted coldly. "All pretense. Father and Pei Yun aren't here today. Let's see who can protect you now." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Xiao Jian despised my obedient and gentle facade the most, as it always earned Pei Yun's pity and help. Her goal was to force me to show my true colors and publicly embarrass myself. When the eldest princess led the guests to admire the flowers, she specifically called me to her side. After looking me over, her eyes filled with contempt. "I expected a great beauty, but to have married into the Xiao family, you must have some impressive skills." On the surface, it was praise. But in reality, she was calling me a seductive fox who would do anything to climb the social ladder. The crowd covered their mouths and giggled. The princess shot Xiao Jian a triumphant look. They were old friends, so naturally, the princess was happy to help in tormenting me. I played dumb, pretending not to understand the hidden meaning. "Thank you for your praise, Your Highness." Along the way, the princess used the pretext of flower viewing to quiz and challenge me. Coming from a humble background, I naturally couldn't identify the famous flowers and mostly failed to answer. Xiao Jian leisurely fanned herself, never offering a word to help, content to watch me make a fool of myself. When we reached the peony garden, the splendid blossoms drew gasps of admiration from the crowd. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my knee. I cried out and fell, crushing a large patch of peonies in the process. The princess roared, "How dare you? These peonies were a gift from the emperor himself." I feigned terror and knelt. "Your Highness, please calm your anger." Xiao Jian unhurriedly knelt to apologize. "Your Highness, please calm your anger. It is my failure to discipline her." "My posture was extremely low," the princess said slowly. "The emperor is a benevolent man, and as a princess, I should follow his example. Since Xiao Shen, she has behaved improperly at the banquet, this princess will punish you by having you kneel here for half an hour." Xiao Jian cupped her hands and replied, "Your Highness, that will not do. Xiao Shen, she's behavior is boorish. She has offended you and spoiled everyone's mood. She should be severely punished, lest she fail to learn her lesson." The crowd chimed in. "We implore Your Highness to punish her severely." I laughed internally. I had wondered what method Xiao Jian would use against me. It turned out to be the same crude and boring trick from my past life. The princess couldn't go against the will of the crowd and reluctantly extended my punishment to kneeling for 6 hours. "Xiao Jian, this wife of yours lacks manners. You must teach her properly what rules are." Xiao Jian smiled and obeyed, then turned to berate me for my poor conduct and lack of refinement. "You are just a merchant's daughter who doesn't belong. What kind of place do you think this is? It is not for you to act wild and break the rules." Hearing the same words as in my past life, I almost laughed out loud. Xiao Jian prided herself on being different from the women of the inner quarters, whom she saw as only capable of jealousy, gossip, and slander over men. Yet, in my eyes, her actions today were no different from those of the women she despised, using a trivial matter to publicly humiliate me. Xiaojian walked the world under the guise of a man, but she never once thought of fighting for women's interests, nor did she understand their struggles. In my past life after this banquet, I locked myself away and cried every day. The grief took its toll, and I fell gravely ill for months, leaving me with a chronic ailment. This time, it was Xiaojian's turn to taste that bitter suffering. I replied, neither servile nor overbearing. Husband, why do you repeatedly look down on merchants? Do you not know that from everyday tea to silk and iron ore, the livelihood of the nation depends on the operations of merchants? Xiaojian looked at me with a mocking gaze, seeing through my naivety. So what? Merchants are greedy and treacherous, a threat to the stability of the state. They have always been considered low class. Why do you think merchants have been burdened with heavy taxes since ancient times? Even if we were to skin you alive or bankrupt you, it would be no issue. This grand speech denigrating merchants drew laughter from the princess and her entourage. Xiaojian said smugly, with a flick of my finger, your father would obediently offer up his silver. So what if I look down on you? What can you do about it? I fell silent, adopting a meek and submissive posture, letting Xiaojian mock me as she pleased. As the sun set, the banquet ended. The princess mercifully waived the rest of my punishment. I kowtowed in thanks and, leaning on Chun Tao, limped back to the carriage. The ride back to the residence was silent. Once in our room, Chun Tao's eyes filled with tears. Mistress, they were too cruel. I'll go find a doctor for you right now. I wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Not yet. First, bring me a brush, ink, and paper. Chun Tao didn't understand my intentions but did as she was told. After filling 2 pages, I gave the paper and some silver to Chun Tao with a few instructions. She listened, looking puzzled but nodding solemnly. Mistress, rest assured. I will complete the task you've given me. After the flower viewing banquet, I claimed illness and stayed in bed. Xiaojian was, of course, triumphant and happy for a while. When Pei Yun found out, he had a huge fight with her, deepening the rift between them. For several days, Pei Yun tried various ways to send me healing ointment, but I refused it all. Xiaojian's smugness didn't last long. Her good days were about to end. 10 days later, General Xiao was impeached by a censor at court. It turned out that a wealthy merchant had recently sold all his assets, traveled 1,000 miles to the capital, and filed a lawsuit against the prefect of Shangzhou, accusing him of using his official position to extort over 10,000 taels of silver and impose illegal taxes. The petition was laid on the emperor's desk. The emperor was furious and ordered a full investigation. Suddenly, all of the Shangzhou prefect's associates were in a panic. At this very moment, the censor repeated Xiaojian's words from the banquet verbatim to the emperor. The Shangzhou prefect and General Xiao were former brothers, in arms who had faced life and death together on the battlefield. Unfortunately, this coincided with a time when the emperor was growing suspicious of the general. All the bad news came at once. General Xiao was berated by the emperor, who scolded him for failing to serve the people and only thinking of how to exploit them. He was docked half a year's salary and stripped of most of his authority. In my previous life, without my carefully orchestrated plot, the Xiao family was unaffected. Instead, their fortunes continued to rise. General Xiao returned home filled with rage, naturally ready to give his filial child some special attention. Xiaojian had just returned from a pleasure house, still humming a tune, when she was met with a brutal beating. This time, the general was not holding back. Xiaojian had been drinking and was unsteady on her feet, unable to put up much of a fight. It took Steward Zhang and a group of servants to finally restrain the general. Xiaojian was covered in bruises and had a broken leg. It was truly satisfying. I felt a slight regret. In his prime, General Xiao could uproot trees and shoot an arrow through a willow leaf at 100 paces. Why couldn't he have accidentally killed her? When Pei Yun heard the news, he was so shocked. He ran out of the house with one shoe missing, rushing to the Xiao residence. Xiao Jian, however, was tough. She was fully conscious after the beating. She clutched her collar tightly, refusing to let several doctors near her. It wasn't until Pei Yun arrived that her eyes reddened, though she stubbornly said, "What are you doing here? I don't need you to care whether I live or die." Pei Yun sighed helplessly. "If you died, do you think I would be happy or sad?" Xiao Jian pouted and held out her arm. "I am tough. I won't die. My arm hurts. Help me with the medicine." They reconciled. Pei Yun, having practiced martial arts since childhood, was skilled at treating injuries and expertly massaged her bruises. Xiao Jian, for once, lost her usual brash demeanor and became shy and flustered. Pei Yun sometimes found himself staring at her fair skin, lost in thought. This delicate, ambiguous atmosphere was ruthlessly shattered by me. "Husband, it is time for your medicine." I walked in, carrying a freshly brewed bowl of medicine. In an instant, a fierce killing intent erupted in Xiao Jian's eyes. "Shen Langshi, you venomous woman, I'll kill you." She snatched an ointment jar and hurled it at me. The medicine bowl in my hands shattered on the floor, the hot liquid scalding my hands. I lowered my head and helplessly drew my hands back. Seeing this, Xiao Jian lunged at me. "You wretch, who are you trying to seduce with that pathetic act?" Pei Yun grabbed her shoulder, holding her back firmly. "Xiao Jian." I adopted a frightened expression at the right moment. "Ina, Xiao Jian, when are you going to stop this? Was your lesson not harsh enough?" Pei Yun roared. Xiao Jian stared at him, her eyes wide with hurt. "You are yelling at me for her." Pei Yun was furious and turned to leave. "You truly don't see your own faults, nor do you know how to reflect on them." When he first met Xiao Jian, he was drawn to her bold and unrestrained nature, but over time he grew disappointed. Her actions were reckless, with no regard for others. In comparison, I seemed sensible and considerate. Just as he was about to leave the residence, Pei Yun worried about Xiao Jian and turned back. He found himself in the kitchen, where he saw me giving a prescription to a servant to brew a new batch of medicine. His eyes fell on the blisters on my hands. He felt a pang of pity and handed me an ointment jar. "This is for burns. Apply it daily, and it won't leave a scar." I accepted it and thanked him softly. Pei Yun lingered, his eyes on the prescription in my hand, hesitating. I understood immediately. He was afraid I would poison the medicine. I offered it to him. "Master Pei, please rest assured. I have consulted the best doctor in the capital, and I am not brewing the medicine myself." Then I ladled half a bowl of the medicinal liquid and drank it down. Pei Yun didn't have time to react, watching as I finished it completely. "Miss Shen, that is not what I meant." As if I hadn't heard, I had Chun Tao call the doctor back to explain the properties of each herb in front of him. Every ingredient was a top-quality herb purchased at great expense. After this display, Pei Yun looked quite uncomfortable. "Actually, you don't have to be so attentive. Xiao Jian doesn't treat you well. Master Pei, you are Xiao Jian's friend. It is natural for you to be concerned." I smiled and continued to explain. "Perhaps you find my behavior of fawning over Xiao Jian strange. But have you considered that I am all alone, and it is only thanks to the generosity of my father-in-law that my life is more comfortable than before? Out of both sentiment and reason, I must, for his sake, be a proper daughter-in-law. If I could stand on my own 2 feet without relying on anyone, why would I endure living at the mercy of others?" Pei Yun clasped his hands in apology. "I am sorry. I have judged a noble heart with a petty mind." I blinked and leaned in closer, whispering, "I have been waiting for you to fulfill your promise to help me with my divorce." "What are you two doing?" Xiao Jian glared at us, her eyes wide with fury. I innocently hid behind Pei Yun. Pei Yun could no longer contain his anger and snapped at her. "Xiao Jian, how long will you continue this unreasonable behavior?" Being scolded. Xiao Jian clutched her chest in pain. Pei Yun, it hurts. But Pei Yun wasn't falling for it. As a man, stop acting so frail. Xiao Jian had always looked down on women, thinking they only knew how to act weak to get men's attention. Now the tables had turned on her, a taste of her own medicine. He had the servants forcibly take Xiao Jian back to her room. For days after, he didn't visit. His feelings for her having soured, Xiao Jian was devastated, smashing things daily to vent her frustration, a far cry from her former carefree, dashing self. The servants who attended to her began to avoid her. I was overjoyed. She finally knew what it felt like to be completely alone. Xiao Jian's injuries healed after 3 months. One day at dinner, I informed General Xiao that I would be going to Lingfu Temple for 2 days. I have set up a memorial tablet for my late mother. Since entering this family, I have not had a chance to serve my late mother-in-law. I thought I could take this opportunity to copy some sutras and pray for them both. General Xiao approved. He then turned to Xiao Jian, who looked completely indifferent, and slapped her in anger. Look at you. You have no regard for your own mother. You will accompany Langxi for these 2 days. Xiao Jian's indifference stemmed from her resentment towards her mother for concealing her gender for personal gain, although the male identity granted her resources and power most women never had. Deep down, she both hated and was addicted to the charade. General Xiao, on the other hand, thought that since Xiao Jian had married me, she should settle down. He was always looking for opportunities to improve our relationship. Xiao Jian glanced at me and smiled in agreement. It seemed she had already thought of a way to use this trip against me. After offering incense at Lingfu Temple, I saw 2 familiar figures from my past life in my peripheral vision. My breath caught, and hot ash from the incense stick burned my hand. Just like in my previous life, Xiao Jian was tired of her father pushing us together and had devised a once, and for all solution, hire 2 men to defile me. Afterward, she would spread the story far and wide. She expected me to take my own life in shame, thus ending her troubles. To her surprise, after a long struggle, I chose to live. This incident later became a thorn between her and Pei Yun. 5 years after my death, Pei Yun accidentally learned the truth of what happened at the temple, and it nearly shattered their relationship. But in the end, their interests were too deeply intertwined for them to part, and they became a couple who were close in name but distant in heart. Since Xiao Jian wanted to ruin my innocence, I might as well grant her wish and add a special gift. I took out a letter I had prepared and instructed Chun Tao to deliver it to a certain person as quickly as possible. I acted as if nothing was wrong, kneeling on the prayer cushion and continuing to copy sutras. Xiao Jian wandered around before the Buddha statue, tapping and touching things, much to the annoyance of the monks, who dared not speak up due to her status. Those who disrespect the gods will eventually reap what they sow. At dinner, Xiao Jian watched with malicious eyes as I drank a bowl of plum and osmanthus soup. Moments later, it was Xiao Jian who collapsed, unconscious. I hid her in another room. Pei Yun rushed to the temple. In my letter, I had told him that Xiao Jian was likely planning to harm me. When he arrived, he found me slumped over a table, unconscious. Shen Langxi, wake up. Where is Xiao Jian? Pei Yun shook my shoulders frantically. I clutched my head in pain, moaning unconsciously. My head, it hurts. Pei Yun let out a sigh of relief. Don't worry, I'll get you out of here. But as he stood, his knees buckled, and a wave of heat washed over him. Before coming, he had been drinking heavily with friends. The letter I sent was dusted with a special powder, combined with his hurried ride and the incense burning in the room. The 4 substances worked together to accelerate the effects of the aphrodisiac. I clung to Pei Yun, my consciousness fading. He was powerless to push me away. I whispered weakly, Pei Yun. My voice sounded exactly like Xiao Jian's a few days prior. Pei Yun had impulsively confessed his feelings to Xiao Jian, only to be met with laughter. Pei Yun, you want me to be a normal woman, get married, and have children. You'll have to wait for the next life. Pei Yun froze, his mind drifting. Why couldn't Xiaojian be as pliant as she was in this moment? Soon, the room was filled with passion. The next morning, a monk brought breakfast and found the room in disarray. I sat calmly, sipping tea. On the bed lay a sleeping Xiaojian. The monk put his palms together and murmured, "Amitabha, the temple is a place of purity." Awakened by the noise, Xiaojian clutched her throbbing head. "Why are you chanting so early in the morning? It is so loud." Seeing me fully dressed and composed, she realized her plan had failed and stormed out in a rage. A month later, I was pregnant. The joyous news spread throughout the Xiao residence. Only two people were not happy. The first was Xiaojian. She was furious and drew her sword to kill me. "Shen Langshi, you adulteress. Let's see who can protect you now." The blade never touched my clothes. General Xiao stopped it. "Have you lost your mind? You won't even acknowledge your own child?" At first, the general had also doubted the child's paternity. For 6 months, Xiaojian had shown me nothing but disdain. Fortunately, the abbot of Lingfu Temple was a close friend of his. He summoned the monk who had delivered meals and cleaned the room that day. The monk recounted everything he saw that morning, even complaining about the strong smell of alcohol in the room. The conclusion was obvious. What ill intentions could a lone woman like me have? General Xiao was in his 60s and longed for a house full of grandchildren. All he wanted was a prosperous family and many descendants. Xiaojian was thrashed by her own father and fled the house. The second unhappy person was Pei Yun. Xiaojian came to him crying and complaining. But upon hearing the news, the teacup in Pei Yun's hand fell and shattered. He couldn't hear a word she said. His mind was filled with the image of me, crying beneath him that night. That evening, I was sitting by the bed reading. A figure appeared outside the window. Chun Dao had just brought in the pregnancy tonic. Seeing Pei Yun, she quickly lowered her head and pretended not to notice. After I took the medicine, Chun Dao gave me a knowing look. I tapped her on the head, and she giggled, closing the door for us and standing guard outside. For a moment, we stood in silence. Pei Yun looked at me with a complex expression. I smiled and said, "Master Pei, you can rest assured. I will not speak of what happened that night. The child is not yours. He is of the Xiao family bloodline." Pei Yun's lips tightened, a hint of displeasure in his eyes. The thought of our current complicated status left him feeling trapped. A strange frustration welled up inside him. After that night, he had suspected it was my scheme, but I had completely avoided him, giving him no opportunity to talk. Xiaojian didn't know he was the father. For a long time, Pei Yun had believed that Xiaojian would be his only wife. Any obstacle between them should not exist. But as he looked at my flat stomach, his gaze softened uncontrollably. The words on the tip of his tongue changed to, "He carries the blood of my Pei family. I will protect you and the child." I refused. "Master P, please leave. I promise I will not entangle you in the future, nor will I use the child to threaten you. No matter who the father is, I will raise him well." Pei Yun was silent for a long time before he left. The next day, a large delivery of nourishing supplements arrived from the Pei residence. I accepted them all. Xiaojian often looked at me as if I were already dead. She had finally realized the catastrophic mess she had created. She thought she had married a helpless rabbit she could crush at will. But instead, she had married a wolf that could tear her flesh. With her mediocre skills, it would not be easy to kill someone without leaving a trace. For my safety, I was constantly surrounded by maids, matrons, and guards. Perhaps revealing her female identity was the best choice. After much thought, she gave up the idea. She couldn't handle the external pressure. Xiaojian had questioned the two thugs. They hadn't found an opportunity to act during their 2 days at the temple. So, the adulterer was someone else. She watched me for a whole month but found no suspicious person. All she could do was watch as jewels, hairpins, and supplements flowed into my hands. Even Pei Yun was on my side. "Xiaojian, stop it. You wronged her first. You can't expect Shen Langshi to remain a widow for the rest of her life." Regarding my pregnancy, He was evasive. Perhaps she has her reasons. Don't push her anymore. Met with resistance everywhere, Xiaojian was on the verge of a breakdown. Her temper grew even more volatile. She beat and cursed any servant who had ever attended to me. At this impasse, I broke my usual pattern and asked to return to my maiden home for a few days. Xiaojian sensed something was amiss. She followed me secretly, seeing me affectionately wipe the sweat from Shen Lansheng's brow as he practiced his swordsmanship. Xiaojian muttered to herself, "They are brother and sister, but they don't seem like it." A moment later, another figure appeared in the courtyard. His face obscured by the shade of a tree, his gentle voice carried on the wind. "Have you been well lately? Has the child been troubling you?" I smiled brightly and touched my belly. "It is too early to tell. I won't feel any movement until the 5th month." Shen Lansheng laughed and lightly punched the man's shoulder. "Brother-in-law, you are too eager." I quickly scolded him. "Lansheng, don't talk nonsense." Hearing this, Xiaojian's eyes lit up. She had finally found the adulterer. She had it all planned. She would cause a huge scene, expose my crime to the world, make the entire capital laugh at and revile me. She wanted everyone, especially Pei Yun, to witness me being drowned in a pig cage. Excited, Xiaojian crept closer. The closer she got, the more familiar the man's voice sounded. "I've decided. Let's call the baby a Heng." Xiaojian caught sight of the jade pendant on the man's waist. A sense of foreboding washed over her. I smiled sweetly at Pei Yun and said, "You are the father. We'll do as you say." In that instant, Xiaojian looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Her eyes filled with rage. She instinctively drew her sword and lunged at me with all her might. At the critical moment, Shen Lansheng reacted swiftly, shouting, "Be careful." He deflected Xiaojian's sword with his own, slashing her arm in the process. Blood gushed out immediately. Xiaojian cried out in pain and stumbled back. Her eyes red, she stared defiantly as Pei Yun shielded me. Pei Yun was flustered. "Ajian, what are you doing here? Your hand is injured." Xiaojian stared at his face and said, enunciating each word, "Pei Yun, you truly are something else." With that, she turned and ran. Pei Yun instinctively started to follow her, then remembered me. He looked at me with guilt. "Langxi, I gave him a reassuring smile. "I am fine, but Xiaojian, I am afraid she'll go back to the residence and tell on us. What if she exposes everything? Can you stop her for me?" I gave him an out. Pei Yun nodded. "Y'all right." After Pei Yun left, Shen Lansheng was indignant on my behalf. "Sister, are you really letting Pei Yun chase after that gender?" Bending Xiaojian, "Aren't you afraid they'll end up together?" I watched Pei Yun's departing figure and said firmly, "They won't otherwise. He wouldn't care about my feelings." Shen Lansheng punched a tree in frustration, sending leaves showering to the ground. "If only I were strong enough to stand on my own, then you wouldn't have had to suffer so much." A few days ago, I had told him the whole truth. His first instinct was to kill everyone who had bullied me, but seeing my calm expression, he forced himself to calm down, trusting that I had a plan. I took his hand. The 12-year-old boy's hand was already covered in small cuts and calluses. It seemed Pei Yun was a good teacher. Otherwise, he would not have become a famous general in the future. I comforted him. "Lansheng, a little suffering now is nothing. Your task is to bide your time and build your strength so you can aid me in the future." Shen Lansheng agreed. On the way back to the Shao residence, I saw many refugees begging by the roadside. Chun Tao grew uneasy. "Mistress," I heard the Northern Liar invading. "Our great Zhou has already lost 5 cities, and refugees are flooding into the capital. It won't be safe today. Should I send someone to find Master Pi? It is too dangerous outside." I lifted the carriage curtain. The sky was a gloomy gray, a storm brewing. By my calculations, both Xiaojian and Pei Yun should be outside the city gates by now. On this day in my past life, Xiaojian and Pei Yun had another huge fight over me. In a fit of anger, Xiaojian rode north to the border, where some of her good friends were stationed. Pei Yun, after much inquiry, found out where she had gone. Fearing for her safety, he followed. When he found her, they ran into the Northern Lai army. The local prefect had abandoned the city and fled. Pei Yun and his group had no choice but to join the defending soldiers. Fortunately, their clever strategy led to a great victory. After this battle, Xiao Jian, confident in her military prowess, impulsively decided to join the army. Pei Yun, worried her identity would be exposed, strongly disagreed. Xiao Jian said nothing, and when he wasn't looking, secretly went straight to the border garrison. By the time Pei Yun found out, it was too late. He had no choice but to enlist as well, protecting her and cleaning up her messes along the way. That was how the legend of the General of the West was born. I instructed Chun Tao. No need, he has his own destiny, we just need to ensure our own safety. A letter from Pei Yun arrived 6 months later. I had just given birth to a Heng. General Xiao was overjoyed. He wasn't too concerned about Xiao Jian running away to join the army. The strict military discipline would save him the trouble of teaching her. With a grandson, his son was no longer so important. Chun Tao happily held a Heng for me to see. Mistress, look. He is so cute. I leaned weakly against the headboard, silently looking at the peaceful, sleeping face in my arms. In my past life, I was violated by thugs and was never able to have children. I had dreamed of having a child with someone I loved. Although this child was not born out of love, my current situation was precarious. He was my only bargaining chip with him. Pei Yun would have to consider my well-being. I opened the letter. It detailed the dangers Pei Yun had faced over the past 6 months. Whenever he was in a desperate situation, the thought of his unborn child gave him the strength to persevere. He regretted missing the child's birth but was glad that after many battles he had been promoted. He urged me to take care of myself and wait for him. At the end, he added a note. I was fortunate to have discussed the culture and geography of Yubi Prefecture with you. I benefited greatly from our conversation, and I have now used that knowledge to defeat the Northern Lai and rise in rank. I will never forget this kindness. Chun Tao brought a brazier, and the flames quickly consumed the letter. I picked up my brush and began to write back to Pei Yun. I told him that our son and I were well and not to worry. Then I meticulously analyzed the Northern Lai's likely next moves and corresponding strategies. I had asked Pei Yun to teach Shen Lansheng martial arts. During his free time, Pei Yun had marveled that I was not interested in needlework, but instead enjoyed reading books like the Commentary on the Water Classic and Comprehensive Geography of the Typing Era. I had acted embarrassed. I've always longed for a broader world, to achieve something great, but since I am confined to the inner quarters, I read these old books to pass the time. Pei Yun picked up a book, which happened to be open to the section on Yubi Prefecture. My maternal grandfather was a merchant. I was a playful child and traveled all over with him. We stayed in Yubi Prefecture for a few days, and the local customs left a deep impression on me. I followed his lead. I heard Yubi Prefecture has treacherous terrain, easy to defend and hard to attack, a place of great strategic importance. In our conversation, I intentionally guided him to discuss the offensive and defensive strategies related to Yubi Prefecture. In my past life, the Northern Lai were defeated and sued for peace. Xiao Jian and Pei Yun returned as celebrated generals, showered with rewards by the emperor. Storytellers in tea houses recounted their glorious achievements. Even I, who rarely left the house, had heard of them. The battle for Yubi Prefecture had been a stalemate for over 2 years, a brutal and bloody conflict. The turning point came with an 80-year-old man who had witnessed a tragic battle there, 70 years prior. The memory stayed with him, and over the next 70 years he figured out how to win that difficult war. Xiao Jian listened to his advice and won a stunning victory, her fame skyrocketing. Thanks to me, that honor now belonged to Pei Yun. After finishing the letter, Chun Tao brought red ink paste. I picked up a Heng, pressed his right foot into the ink, and then onto the letter. Once the footprint was dry, Chun Tao sent the letter off. In just 2 years, the Northern Lie, unable to withstand the Great Zhou, sent envoys to negotiate peace. This time, the renowned general was Pei Yun alone. Relying on my letters, he anticipated the enemy's every move, won battles against overwhelming odds, and rose through the ranks. When he returned to the capital for an audience with the emperor, he rode through the streets, accepting the cheers of the people. As he passed the Shao residence, his eyes met mine, then fell on the sturdy little aheng in my arms. He tightened his grip on the reins, his gaze lingering. As for Xiaojian, the moment she entered, she pointed her sword at me, terrifying aheng, who clutched my leg and cried, "You ruined me." The tip of her sword trembled, she could barely stand. I picked up aheng and walked towards her, speaking in a magnanimous and considerate tone. "Husband, you must be exhausted, speaking such nonsense. I have prepared hot water and a meal. Would you like to eat first?" Xiaojian screamed in desperation. "Shen Langxi, you will die a horrible death." She swung her sword wildly, hacking at everything. But she didn't dare to truly kill aheng or me. She knew that if we died by her sword, Pei Yun would never forgive her. When she tired, the wound on her abdomen began to bleed. Her lips turned pale, and she fainted. I had her carried back to her room. I heard that Xiaojian had failed to gain any official position in the past 2 years. She was never particularly talented to begin with. In her previous life, Pei Yun had carefully planned for her, paving her way to glory. This time she wasted most of her energy trying to win back Pei Yun's heart, even resorting to tricks to try and get pregnant by him, hoping to supplant my son and me. After several months with no sign of pregnancy, she panicked and secretly sought a doctor, only to receive devastating news. She was infertile for life. She immediately suspected I had tampered with her medicine. She was right. I had added several herbs that would cause female infertility. When I was young, my mother was often ill, and it pained me to see her suffer. By the time I learned to read, I had already familiarized myself with half a medical text. Under the pretext of improving her health, I had the doctor add a few extra ingredients to Xiaojian's prescription. These herbs were known for their miraculous effects in healing bones and boosting male fertility. As for their effect on women, I am sure Xiaojian was experiencing it firsthand. In my past life, when Xiaojian returned triumphantly, she had a child with her. It was the result of an accident with Pei Yun. She lied, saying it was her child with another woman. I raised him for several years without complaint. Before I died, I was worried the bloody scene would give him nightmares. Instead, the child let out a sigh of relief. "It is good that she is dead. She was such a nuisance." Xiaojian had turned me into a ghost, neither human nor spirit. She could not blame me for becoming a demon to seek revenge. Xiaojian fell gravely ill. She became so thin she was like a skeleton, her large eyes darting around unnervingly. But she forced herself to summon all the family clansmen. They were all confused and annoyed. "We are all very busy. We don't have time for your games, Xiaojian. What is so important?" General Xiao stood up to calm them. "Everyone, please be patient." He turned and glared at Xiaojian. "What are you trying to do?" Xiaojian looked at the packed room and gave a chilling laugh, as if she had nothing left to lose. Suddenly, a figure rushed out from the crowd. It was Pei Yun. "Xiaojian, don't be rash." He grabbed her hand. Pei Yun was now a favorite of the emperor. He was afraid Xiaojian would expose the truth and tarnish his name. He had received my tip-off and rushed here to stop her. He had not yet heard aheng call him father. Xiaojian looked at him coldly and shook off his hand. "My business has nothing to do with you, Pei. You have no right to interfere." Seeing me approach with the child in my arms, Xiaojian became agitated, grabbed me, and announced to everyone, "This wretch has committed adultery and given birth to a bastard child, and she refuses to confess. Today, I, Xiaojian, ask you all to witness a blood paternity test to clear my name." I feigned disbelief. "What are you saying? This is our child. He is still so young. How can you make such baseless accusations in front of everyone?" How will he face the world in the future? Father-in-law, you must stand up for me. I knelt directly before General Shao holding a heng. The boy was well behaved and reached out his little hands to the general. Grandpa, hold me. General Shao picked him up, his eyes filled with adoration. Don't be afraid. Grandpa will protect you. He looked at Xiao Jian and scolded her. You have brought enough shame upon this family. Someone take the young master away. Xiao Jian stubbornly refused. Father, just listen to me this one time. She called for a basin of water and a knife. Father, take a good look at the bastard in your arms. He doesn't look like me or you or my mother. And if you look closely, he doesn't much resemble Shen Longxi either. Aren't you the least bit suspicious? Her words made General Shao hesitate. He had, on occasion, felt a flicker of doubt, but it was always dispelled by his grandson's adorable face. An onlooker spoke up. That is right. Now that you mention it, he really doesn't resemble anyone in the Shao family. Don't you all agree? The crowd murmured in agreement. Xiao Jian looked at me, her expression a mixture of madness and triumph. Pei Yun's face was grim. Xiao Jian, must you burn everything to the ground? This will do you no good. Xiao Jian looked at him with sorrow. There was no trace of affection for her in his face, only concern for me and the child. She gave him one last deep look and turned back to her father. Father, I want a blood paternity test, this time. General Shao agreed. He turned to me. Langxi, are you willing? I nodded with grace. As long as it can clear my son's name and mine, I am willing. Before coming here, I was anxious, worried that Xiao Jian would play her final card. But in the end, she came up with this foolish idea. I had truly overestimated her. When Xiao Jian took the blood, she viciously cut a heng's finger, as if she wished she could end his life with that single stroke. Pei Yun saw it all, his heart aching, but he could do nothing. He looked at me and I gave him a reassuring glance. When the 2 drops of blood in the water failed to merge, Xiao Jian shrieked, See, this spawn is not mine. General Shao was stunned into silence. Everyone present was shocked. Madam Shao, everyone has seen how well the Shao family has treated you. How could you do such a thing? Exactly. Even though you've been kind to us, uncles, this concerns the honor of the Shao family. No one can protect you now. The hall erupted in chaos. Xiao Jian stared at my face, trying to find a trace of fear or panic. She found none. General Shao's gaze was heavy. Shen Langxi, do you have anything to say? I picked up the knife and said calmly, Of course. I walked towards Pei Yun. Master Pei, may I borrow some of your blood? No, Xiao Jian shouted. This has nothing to do with Pei Yun. There is no need to involve an innocent party. She still had feelings for him and didn't want to embarrass him publicly. I ignored her and looked at Pei Yun. Are you willing? Pei Yun chose to trust me soon. Pei Yun's blood failed to merge with the heng's. Pei Yun froze. Then he saw his own blood merge perfectly with Xiao Jian's samano and exclaimed, How strange. Could it be that Pei Yun and Xiao Jian are brothers? I cut my own wrist and my blood dripped into the water. Miraculously, my blood did not merge with a heng's. Ivrion was astonished. The ancient said blood is thicker than water. Could it be that this Aheng is not Shen Langxi's biological son? I smiled without a word and asked General Shao to give his blood. Once again, the crowd gasped. My blood merged with General Shao's. His blood also merged with Aheng's, but not with Xiao Jian's. The onlookers were amazed. I cleared my throat and said, I believe everyone thinks that only the blood of relatives will merge. In fact, that is not true. It is merely a popular misconception. If you do not believe me, feel free to try it yourselves. Indeed, many people did. The situation was completely reversed. Xiao Jian lunged at me in a frenzy. Shen Langxi, you must have tampered with it. You are framing me. Don't be fooled by her. She missed. General Shao slapped her so hard she fell to the ground. You rebellious child, I'll beat you to death today. Pei Yun stopped him. Lord Shao, calm down. Xiao Jian injured her head on the battlefield. and her mind is not clear. That is what led to today's situation. Please let her rest at home and avoid contact with the outside world for now. In the last battle, Xiaojian had watched Pei Yun's star rise, while the gap between them grew wider and their relationship more distant. Impatient, she recklessly led a small squad to hunt down the remnants of the Northern Lai army, only to fall into a trap and be captured. All the men who followed her were killed. Xiaojian was tortured by the enemy to the point of a mental breakdown. Fortunately, Pei Yun arrived with reinforcements in time to rescue her. Hearing Pei Yun's explanation, the others shook their heads in pity. Considering how well the Xiao daughter-in-law has treated us, we will let today's matter go. The blood test fiasco passed without further incident. Afterward, Pei Yun and Xiaojian's relationship was completely broken. Pei Yun sought me out privately. Langxi, you should not stay in the Xiao family for long. I will arrange for you and a Heng to fake your deaths and leave this place for good. He reluctantly touched a Heng's little face. My grandmother is old and frail, constantly taking medicine. If a Heng could be officially recognized by our family, perhaps the joy would improve her health. I did not agree. How could Xiaojian let me go so easily, unless she, my words hung in the air. Pei Yun paused, silent for a long time. He could no longer remember the bright, happy days he once shared with Xiaojian. Rumors had begun to circulate that he was a cut-sleeve, having remained unmarried for so many years. But Pei Yun was a normal man with normal desires: to marry, have children, and build a family. Finally, he made a difficult decision. Xiaojian's hatred for me was bone deep. She threw all caution to the wind, determined to see me dead, and I had long anticipated her next move. One morning, I went to pay my respects to General Xiao. He was holding a Heng on his lap when the boy suddenly burst into tears. "Hurts, hurts!" I rushed forward. "What is wrong? Where does it hurt?" Suddenly, I noticed the veins on the back of General Xiao's hand were bulging. I felt a familiar, intense killing intent. It was the same ruthlessness he had when he killed me in my past life. I nearly collapsed, but forced myself to remain composed. General Xiao had been normal yesterday. It seemed Xiaojian had insisted on seeing him last night to reveal her secret. General Xiao hated betrayal above all else. No matter how much he hated Xiaojian and her mother, he had to get rid of me first. His eyes met mine, and he quickly masked his killing intent, reverting to a kind, elderly figure. "Did Grandpa hold you too tight?" I found an excuse to take a Heng and quickly returned to my room. Chun Tao lifted a Heng's clothes. There were 2 dark bruises on his waist. It was clear he had meant to kill him. The only reason he hadn't acted was because the time was not yet right. The Xiao father and daughter had decided to use the spring banquet, 5 days from now, to make their move. The current emperor had not named a crown prince. The 3rd and 7th princes were the main contenders. Recently, the emperor's health had been failing. The 3rd prince was acting as regent, and his ascension to the throne seemed imminent. The 7th prince, the empress's son, and his faction were unwilling to accept this. They planned to stage a coup at the spring banquet. The 3rd prince had received word of this but lacked military support due to his mother's weak family connections. Through an advisor, he secretly contacted General Xiao, promising him great rewards if he succeeded. General Xiao was old, and his power had waned over the years, but his reputation and connections remained strong. He secretly persuaded the commander of the Imperial Guards to pledge allegiance to the 3rd prince. Thus, the spring banquet was the perfect time for a violent showdown. In my past life, I was a laughingstock among the capital's elite and was not invited. I heard from the servants that the 7th prince's rebellion caused chaos, and many officials and their families died. I looked at the invitation steward Zhang had just given me. Xiaojian surely intended for my son and me to die, naturally during the chaos. Otherwise, Pei Yun would not let her off. When Chun Tao returned with the medicine, her face was pale with fear. "Mistress, we are being watched." She had noticed many unfamiliar faces in the residence, monitoring her every move. I signaled her to be quiet. She understood immediately, and acted as if nothing was wrong. Xiaojian, afraid I would see through her plan and alert Pei Yun, had already secretly placed us under guard. This desperate move was within my expectations. I had already instructed Shen Lansheng that if he couldn't contact me, he should proceed with our prearranged plan. 5 days later, I dressed in my finest for the banquet. As I left, a peach blossom fell onto my eyebrow. I noticed that the blossoms were particularly vibrant this year, clustered together, exuding a murderous aura. A truly good omen. I sat at the banquet with a hang. The ladies around me were chatting and laughing. The change came in an instant. The deafening sounds of battle erupted outside. Somebody shouted, "The 7th prince is rebelling." Everyone scattered in terror. Only the eldest princess, drunk and annoyed, pointed at the soldiers who rushed in. "You insolent dogs, daring to disturb my pleasure." She smashed her cup, and a head rolled to the ground. The prince consort and several of her male companions were so terrified they wet themselves, abandoning the princess's body. I happened to turn and see this horrifying scene. In my past life, the princess had met the same end. As the emperor's only daughter, she had been spoiled her entire life. She had once allowed her consort and lovers to beat the 7th prince's concubine's brother to death in the street, driving the concubine to die of grief. The 7th prince hated her for it. The 3rd prince also couldn't tolerate her, because she had once coquettishly asked the emperor for an edict naming her as his successor. The emperor, thinking it a joke, had actually given it to her. A ruler must eliminate all threats. I sighed with emotion. Those who commit many injustices are doomed to destroy themselves. Following my planned route, I quickly escaped to a safe, hidden location. Awaiting me were several of Pei Yun's trusted men, tasked with ensuring our safety. "We are late, my lady. I hope you were not frightened." I nodded, not blaming them. "Thank you for your efforts." Aheng did not cry or fuss, staying quietly by my side. After several hours, as the sun set, casting a dim yellow light on my shoulders, a figure flew in. My guards drew their blades warily, but it was Shen Lansheng, covered in blood. I went to check his injuries. "Where are you hurt?" Shen Lansheng shook his head. "I am fine, sister. It was a little tricky, but I took care of them all." Xiaojian had made 2 fatal mistakes. First, she never told her father the truth about her gender. Second, until her death, she held on to the illusion that Pei Yun would not kill her. And to ensure General Xiao would not oppose their union in the future, she never told him that Aheng was Pei Yun's son. So Pei Yun's men easily lured them into a trap. The Xiao father and daughter, caught off guard, died tragically under the blades of Shen Lansheng and the others. The spring banquet coup ended with the death of the 7th prince and the madness of the empress. The emperor passed away, and the throne went to the 3rd prince. When rewards were distributed, the Xiao family was at the top of the list. Tragically, the father and son had died in battle, leaving behind a widow and an orphan. The emperor mourned the loss of such talent and rewarded them heavily. Aheng was granted the title of Earl of Zhongyang. I accepted the imperial edict and thanked the emperor. I closed our doors to the world and focused on raising Aheng. 3 years later, I left Aheng at the Xiao residence. Without taking any of the Xiao family's wealth, I married Pei Yun alone. By now, Pei Yun was a powerful court official, enjoying immense prestige. Rumors circulated that he had remained single all these years, waiting for me, his childhood betrothed. He was seen as a truly devoted man. On my wedding day, Aheng stood at the gate to see me off. "Mother, go without worry. Do what you want to do. I will take good care of myself." His mature demeanor pained my heart. Aheng was a prodigy, showing astonishing talent since he began his studies at age 3. His eyes seemed to see through everything. Tears welled up. But I hardened my heart and entered the red sedan chair. Less than half a year after marrying Pei Yun, I became pregnant. Within a year, I gave birth to the Pei family's eldest son and heir. Pei Yun's parents were long gone, and his grandmother, his only living relative, treated me well. Everyone envied my comfortable and happy life, and I diligently fulfilled my duties as the Pei family's daughter. In-law many times, Pei Yun would say with emotion. Langxi, to have you in this life is a blessing of 3 lifetimes. He no longer remembered the young classmate from the academy all those years ago. In my 5th year of marriage to Pei Yun, the Western barbarians invaded. Pei Yun was appointed commander of the expedition. Before he left, I personally brewed a jar of peach blossom wine for him to be opened upon your return. Pei Yun laughed and agreed. Another spring passed, and grim news came from the front lines. Pei Yun had contracted a sudden illness during the first battle and unfortunately passed away. His subordinate, Shen Lansheng, fearing the news would demoralize the troops, disguised himself as Pei Yun and led the army in his place. Only after repelling the enemy did he dare to return to the capital and report the truth. But the emperor was overjoyed. Not only did he pardon him, he rewarded him. The young and capable Shen Lansheng replaced Pei Yun as the new celebrated general. On the day of Shen Lansheng's return, we opened that jar of peach blossom wine. I sat under the peach tree and poured 3 bowls, Zone for General Xiao Wen for Xiao Jian, and the last one for Pei Yun. Shen Lansheng was confused. Sister, although being a bystander is a crime, Pei Yun's actions didn't warrant death. I poured the 3rd bowl onto the ground and smiled. How could Pei Yun be innocent? On the day I discovered the truth in my past life, I almost screamed. At the critical moment, it was Pei Yun who struck my throat with a branch, rendering me mute. He cut off my last chance of survival. He was an accomplice, not an innocent bystander. That is why, for the past 5 years, I had been poisoning his food and drink. Once he reached the western lands, the poison would naturally take its course. In this life, I have finally completed my revenge. For the rest of my days, I will simply enjoy the wealth and glory of the Xiao and Pei families, and live out my life in peace.